Hey guys, got a slideshow for you here. We'll get it started. Make sure that you do your sheet that goes along with this too. So today's slideshow introducing a new topic. First people in North Dakota. So the first people in North Dakota came around somewhere around 13,000 years ago. The theory goes that they crossed the land bridge following mammoth herds. There's several different theories on how people got to the United States and then eventually to North Dakota, but that's probably the most accepted. But there is other ones. There's theories that people came from Southeast Asia, people that jumped from Hawaii, and there's other ones out there too. But the earliest people in North Dakota are all known as the Paleo Indians. Now, when we talk about Paleo Indians, we're not talking about just one group. That's just what people were called back when before archaeologists knew what the individual groups were. So anybody in the United States at that time was known as a Paleo Indian. So these people came around, just as the Ice Age was really ending, and they didn't have like a specific tribe, and largely that's because nobody knows really a whole lot about them. The what little information we have comes from just not accounts, but fossils that archaeologists have found in other places, not necessarily in North Dakota. But anyway, one of the real cool things about these people are these Paleo Indians is they did follow mammoth herds, but they also hunted, as you can see right here, giant bison. Now, when we go to Bismarck in May, they actually have a skeleton or a fossil of a giant ancient bison head. So this would be your modern bison down here, and this would be the ancient bison that these people, the Paleo Indians, would have hunted. So next up after the Paleo Indians was a group called the Archaic people. And the Archaic people around about 9,000 years ago, not much is known about them. If I'm not mistaken, there's no real fossils that were around to show the just to show that there's 100% proof that these people were here. The Archaic people are also known as the Clovis people. The Clovis people um, are the Archaic people. They were known that because of the way the spearheads have been found around the United States. There's stone spearheads that look like a clovis or a spade. If you've ever seen a spade, if you want to look that up, that's what a clovis really is. And that's the people, again, that's how they were named. There was no individual tribes. They just were named that because of the arrowheads that were found. So these are in theory, these are the earliest people in North Dakota. Next up, earliest Americans continued. So the next definitive people were the woodland people, and we know a little bit more about the woodland people just because down here, as you can see, the Menoken Indian Village by Menoken, North Dakota, kind of by Bismarck, um, this was a woodland settlement, or at least that's what was thought. That it's the one of the oldest. I think it is the oldest fossils of people living in North Dakota. And if you wanted to look a little more into it, they know that these people, they lived in round houses. Um, there's not solid proof of what these houses were made out of, but scientists think they're either made out of like a buffalo hide or just sod from the ground. Wood, even now, or back then, I'm sorry, wood was very scarce in North Dakota. We just didn't get the rainfall to grow trees. So you had to use what was available to you, and that was either buffalo hide or sod. So these people, again, they were not distinguished as one single tribe. because there's just no record of who was part of what. So everybody's grouped into one called the woodland people. And the reason they're called that is because scientists think that they migrated in from like Minnesota, in areas in the east. Well, um, the woodland people led up to the late woodland people, the plains nomadic people, and the plains village people. So you had these groups that started kind of splitting off. So the late woodland people were again coming from the east, thinking they're from Minnesota. The plains nomadic people migrated thought that they migrated in from like a South Dakota, or even farther north into Canada. And then you have the plains village people, and really the most evidence up to this point is from the plains village people, because the plains village people that they did exactly what it says. They settled in villages, so the remnants of their villages can be found mostly throughout the Red River and the Missouri River, but there is places along the James River that have been found also. The Plains nomadic people were the first people documented to live in teepees, and they used something called buffalo jumps. So a teepee is something you've probably seen. What's really cool, again in May, we'll see one at the Heritage Center, and how big they are. You think of like a teepee as a tent. A teepee is a tent. It's a type of tent, but it's so much bigger. A teepee is a wide base at the bottom, narrow base at the top. Basically, each log forces its weight on each other, and then you just wrap buffalo skin or whatever, and they're easy to set up. They're easy to take down. Perfect for people that are nomads. Nomads are people that don't stay in one spot for too long. And then buffalo jumps, and there's records of buffalo jumps simply because what scientists, archaeologists have done is they've dug up below like a butte or a cliff or whatever. They found all these buffalo bones. Well, what a buffalo jump did is the plains nomadic people would round up these buffalo and they would force them off the cliff. So what would happen is the back end of the herd, once forced, they wouldn't necessarily jump, but they would fall off this cliff to either hurt themselves or die. If they're hurt, then the people of the village would take care of them, dispatch them, or hopefully in the jump or in the fall they would die and they wouldn't have to worry about it, because an injured buffalo obviously is very dangerous. And then you have the Plains Village people. The Plains Village people developed into what the first modern Native American tribe that is known to be in North Dakota, the Mandan. And they scientists speculate that the first modern Native Americans, the Mandan, came into North Dakota about 900 A.D. So quite a long time ago. They're the first modern tribe because they're the first tribe that were documented, that people can trace their history. One unique thing about Native Americans, though, is until Europeans arrived, none of their history was written down. They passed their history orally. They have passed it through language, through stories, and so those stories over even thousands of years could have changed, and we only know what our first Europeans actually wrote down. All right, so the late historic period is what we know most about. 1738 till now. So the first European in North Dakota was Pierre de la Sueur de la Vendredi. And he was a European. He was a fur trapper, explorer type guy, and he came in from Canada. France controlled Canada at the time, and he wanted to extend his fur trapping trading empire, or just for France. And so what that did is it led him into North Dakota because he had heard, especially along the Red River, that the trapping was good. Um, anyway, back to the Mandan. The Mandan was the first modern tribe in North Dakota, and scientists think that they came from either northern Minnesota, around the Great Lakes area, were pushed out somehow about 900 AD. The Mandan were considered sedentary people. Sedentary means that they didn't move. They built a house and that's where they lived. Many Plains Indians were nomadic. They didn't try to farm. They gathered, they hunted. They hunted buffalo and they just followed the buffalo herds. Well, the Mandan, they farmed. Not saying they didn't hunt, but their primary food source was hunting, and then they would go on buffalo hunts when the opportunity would arise. Um, La Verende was the first European again to make contact with the Mandan around the mouth of the Heart River. The Heart River, I can show to you if we go to a North Dakota map. I'm just going to go to images. I'll just pick this one. So here's the Missouri, and that leads into Bismarck. The Heart River is right here. Okay, so around the mouth of the Heart River, right by present-day Bismarck, essentially, is where the Heart River is located. And that right there is where that he first made contact with the Mandan villages. It was said at the time that there was, if you look at one of these houses right here, typically it would have anywhere from 5-10 people in each one, maybe more. The first village, and there were several like this that he made contact with, there was 130 of these earthen lodges. So if you take 10 people in there, times 130, that's what is that? 13,000. That's a lot of people. And that was just one village. So the Mandan populated, especially central North Dakota, for hundreds of years, and they just I mean, they were, can't think of what I was going to say, but they were very, very much the dominant tribe of central North Dakota. Um, anyway, so uh, the Mandan eventually, what happened to them was, as it happened to many tribes, is smallpox. Smallpox was um, the disease that was the downfall of almost every tribe in the United States, let alone just the Mandan. And about 1781, they had smallpox outbreaks before that, but 1781 it just destroyed the Mandan tribes. And the thing is if you don't have any people to protect, or if there's no people around and everybody's dead and sick, and nobody protect you, no warriors around, that other tribes are going to take your land over. I mean, they're going to take it by force or by treaty, but they're going to take it because they can. And when that happened, the Mandan looked to team up with other tribes to just simply get protection. So what happened is the Mandan teamed up with the Hidatsa and the Arikara. That happened eventually. It was the Hidatsa first, and then the Arikara, and they became the three affiliated tribes. So that happened about 1781, and eventually, when they teamed up with the Arikara, they moved everybody from the mouth of the Heart River all the way north to around present-day Washburn, and they built a village called Like a Fishhook Village, simply because it was like a fishhook, and that's why they called it that. In 1845, didn't last very long. Obviously, 1845 was towards the end of the Native Americans in North Dakota. So the next group we're going to talk about is the Hidatsa. The Hidatsa also moved from Minnesota in the 1500s, a lot later than the Mandan. They had three groups, and the largest settled by Washburn, and that was the group that really teamed up with the Mandan to start with the start of the three affiliated tribes. But they spread out from Devil's Lake all the way to Washburn. Devil's Lake, our largest natural lake in North Dakota, was a very desirable place to be. Washburn, if you look on a North Dakota map, which we will in a second here, Washburn is located, so here's Bismarck. If you go, there's no roads on this map, but if you go straight north, Washburn is right there, right along the Missouri River. And it's thought, even right away when the Hidatsa came in North Dakota, that they actually were part of the Mandan villages almost right away. Get the current slide here. So the next group we're going to talk about is the Arikara, and they're kind of the later group to come to North Dakota. They called themselves the Sanish, and they were once part of the Pawnee group of Native Americans in the South. So Arikara and Sanish are the same people. It really depends on the Arikara were called that by the Europeans, and then the Sanish were what they called themselves. So what happened was they followed the Missouri River up from the South Dakota in the 1800s. They were forced out by the Lakota, or the Sioux. They were forced out because smallpox killed a lot of their people, and they weren't able to defend themselves. So by the mid-1830s, they had joined the Hidatsa and the Mandan and formed the three affiliated tribes. And the three affiliated tribes, that's largely how the groups are known today. So when you talk about Native American reservations, there's the three affiliated tribes reservation in kind of northwest North Dakota, not quite northwest, north central, where you have cities like Newtown, Mandaree, White Shield. Those are part of the three affiliated tribes. Next, you have the Chippewa, and the Chippewa were not as big a group in North Dakota. They kind of occupied northeast North Dakota, came from around Lake Superior. Again, smallpox affected them. They brought some of their lifestyle to North Dakota, but they adapted too. They adapted to buffalo hunting and things like that. But as you can see in the picture, they still built great canoes. And if you've ever been to where the reservation for the Chippewa is in northeast North Dakota, it's almost a different world than what we have down here. They allied with the French, so they had the backing of the whole French army if they needed it, because the French and the Chippewa were big trading partners, and the French wanted to keep that going because, I mean, the fur trade was almost like the modern day like oil, very, very lucrative business. So the last people we're going to talk about, there's others, but the last ones we're going to talk about is the Great Sioux Nation. So by far, the Sioux or the Lakota were the biggest. They were the biggest tribe in North Dakota. They dominated North Dakota for the most part. You had three main groups. So I'm going to go here. So you had the Lakota, the Dakota, and the Nakota. So La, Da, and Na. The Lakota, or the Teton, they were by far the largest group. Now, I said with the other two, they're most likely the groups to be found around Oaks. Well, really, with the Great Sioux Nation, there was Sioux Indians all over North Dakota. So it wasn't like you wouldn't find the Lakota down here at some point, but you're probably more likely to find the other two. So there was about 12,000 Teton Sioux. They are usually considered the most dangerous to Europeans also. Lewis and Clark, their closest they were to death was because of a group of Teton Sioux. Anyway, um, the Lakota and all groups migrated from the plains from the plain to the plains from Minnesota, and they were eventually this group was kicked out by the Chippewa and the French, largely the French. So what they did is they had to adapt to North and South Dakota, and they expanded and hunted buffalo. Um, and became very dominant. They had range, buffalo hunting range from North Dakota to Nebraska to Wyoming to South Dakota, even into western Iowa. So they were very, very dominant on the plains. The Lakota were the most warrior-like and the most. They were also the most transient. They were the ones that got up and moved. They're the most nomadic of all the groups. So the next group, the Dakota, was the second member of the Great Sioux Nation, or the Santee Sioux. This group was made, like it says, of Sioux was most likely the group that would have lived around Oaks. So this group of Sioux was more like the Mandan. They were farmers. They were sedentary, and they decided that that nomadic life wasn't for them. They definitely hunted buffalo because when the Sioux hunted buffalo, they got together with other members of the Great Sioux Nation to hunt. But their main source of not income but living was farming and trade. Uh, the last group, the Nakota or the Yankton, were also a group that may have lived around Oaks. Now, the Nakota would have spread well into South Dakota, and would have also been kind of a plains Indian. They would have been a little more nomadic, meaning they traveled a little more than the Santee, but they were also farmers. The Teton really were the only group that was um, that would have been just strictly uh, nomadic. That's what they did. They didn't farm. They hunted buffalo and then they looked for land to take. So that's the end of your slideshow. There's other groups that we didn't talk about, like the Cree. We didn't talk about the Métis, which is a combination of a French fur trapper and a Chippewa woman. And they had their own group in and of itself, and were known for a lot of different trade. But I kind of wanted to not to overwhelm you with information. So make sure that you do your worksheet on this slideshow, and make sure you're ready to review it.